You've learned the history of agriculture from about 10,000 years ago up to the present time. And hopefully you've seen easily that humans have been able to meet the challenges that they've faced and increase yields in order to feed the world's populations. Now that's a little bit of a generalization, but in general, humans have been able to solve their problems. So because of the Green Revolution and the massive amount of food that we're currently growing, there are several issues with agriculture, with today's agricultural practices. And so that's what we're going to look at with this lecture. So I've listed the major problems here. So first of all, we're not going to address this separately, but the population is continuing to grow. We've seen that the world's human population grew exponentially since the Industrial Revolution, and the growth is starting to slow down, but we're still predicted to have about 10 billion people by 2050. We have just a little over 7 billion now. So we do need to develop a way to be able to feed almost 3 billion more people by 2050. The second major problem is the reliance on fossil fuels, the agriculture's reliance on fossil fuels. Third is related to that, the greenhouse gas emissions that come from agriculture. The fourth current issue is the reliance on monoculture, which we'll address here. The fifth is reliance on annual crops, meaning crops that need to be planted every year. Sixth is the unsustainable use of water. The seventh problem is the heavy use of fertilizers and pesticides. And the eighth, and I put a question mark here, and we'll address this separately, is genetically modified crops. And so I put a question mark there because it may or may not be the problem that you think it is. Okay, so we've already addressed the population growth, so we're going to move right to problem number 2 to add some details. So problem number 2 was reliance on fossil fuels. So fossil fuels are used in agriculture to power the machinery. Remember, we looked at a solution to make agriculture more efficient was to use machinery, but that machinery runs on fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are used to make fertilizers and pesticides. We'll take a look at that later. Fossil fuels are used for transporting, so the vehicles that transport the foods, the crops. Fossil fuels are used in processing and packaging of foods. Think about even when you're just looking at vegetables, think about all of the vegetables that are stored and packaged in plastic, which comes from fossil fuels. And fossil fuels are used to power refrigeration in the form of electricity. So there's a heavy reliance on fossil fuels by agriculture. Over here on the right, it breaks down the food system energy consumption. So it shows that 27% of food system energy consumption comes from farms, 33% is refrigeration, 13% is in food processing, 11% is in fuel for processing, 9% in packaging, and 7% in transportation. And then if we zoom out and take a look at the big picture, agriculture is responsible for 17% of all of the energy use in the United States. Problem number 3 is greenhouse gas emissions. Now, obviously, problem number 2 and problem number 3 are related in that fossil fuel use does generate greenhouse gas emissions. But you've also seen that greenhouse gases include more than just carbon dioxide from burning fossil fuels. And in fact, 9% of the US's greenhouse gases come from agriculture. So some come from that fossil fuel use. This is largely carbon dioxide. But we've also learned that nitrous oxide comes from soil management practices. So we add those nitrogen fertilizers and those mix with oxygen and form nitrous oxide, which is a greenhouse gas. But also, remember that agriculture includes growing livestock. There is methane from livestock that's emitted. You would think that wouldn't be much, but because of the vast numbers of livestock that we grow, methane from livestock is a big contributor to greenhouse gas greenhouse gases and the increasing greenhouse effect leading to global warming. And then also manure from that livestock emits methane. So if we take a look over here at the 2015 US methane emissions by source, we can see that enteric fermentation, so that is fermentation occurring inside the guts of livestock. Enteric is referring to the gut. That's what produces the methane in the gut that is then usually belched out of the animal. That accounts for 25% of US methane emissions. So that's pretty hefty, especially considering what a strong greenhouse gas methane is. Problem number 4 is a reliance on monoculture. Now, monoculture is when you grow one single crop or one single animal in a given area. And so I'm going to use the example of corn as a monoculture, although most of our heavy crops are grown as monoculture. Corn is the most commonly grown crop in the United States, and it is in everything. So I'm just going to give you some examples here. All of the things you see here on this page include corn. So cornmeal may be incorporated into the bun of this burger, but it's also used to feed the cow where that hamburger comes from. Corn is used to create corn syrup and high fructose corn syrup, which is in a lot of products that you consume. So that's probably, so this high fructose corn syrup is in this dressing, it's in this syrup, it's in this grape jelly, it's in this pop, it's in this ketchup. Corn oil is used for vegetable oil to fry these French fries. And then other food additives are made from corn derivatives. So even Sweet and Low may have some corn derivatives. Additionally, corn can be used to make coatings for products. So corn may even be incorporated into some of the packaging for these products or the coating of this ibuprofen pill that you would find in this bottle. So corn literally is everywhere in this country. Okay, so let's use corn to illustrate the problems caused by monoculture. So corn in the United States, a lot of land is used to grow it. So 97 million acres in the United States are devoted to growing corn. Corn is also a crop that requires a lot of water, and each year 5.6 cubic miles of water are used to irrigate our cornfields in the United States alone. 5.6 million tons of synthetic nitrogen, so synthetic fertilizer, is added per year for corn. That is, corn also requires a lot of fertilizer, more than other crops. In addition to that, 1 million tons of manure is added to cornfields as well. And then we also have something that you may or may not know about. Billions of dollars of U.S. citizen tax dollars go to subsidize the corn industry each year. So what that means is, because we have such a heavy reliance on corn, the government doesn't want the corn industry to collapse. And so they provide subsidies to farmers in order to make the process of growing corn less risky. And so that's where those subsidies come in. So we're spending billions of dollars. If we look over here on the right, these are farm subsidies each year in 2012 US dollars. So it would be a little bit higher now. The last year that we see, and I think it's grayed out because this is a little bit older, 2014, almost $30 billion went to subsidize corn. So there's a lot of money in corn as well. Okay, so let's bring this back out and talk about monoculture in general. So with monoculture, we're using a lot of land. It's not just corn where we would use this. We're using a lot of land to grow it, a lot of water to irrigate it, and a lot of fertilizer to grow it. Remember, fertilizer, and we'll come back to this a little bit later, but remember, fertilizer use contributes to eutrophication. And so when you have 97 million acres being fertilized every single year, that's a lot of fertilizer that will eventually run off into waterways and lead to eutrophication. So not only do we grow our crops in monoculture, we also raise the majority of our livestock in monoculture. So I have a few pictures here to show you what this looks like. Top left, this is a monoculture of pigs being grown for pork and bacon and ham. On the bottom is a monoculture of cows being grown for beef. These are, well, I'm not sure if these are beef cattle or dairy cattle. It doesn't matter. They're all grown in monoculture like this. On the right, we have a monoculture of chickens. If you go to the grocery store and you buy traditional meat products, your meat came from a monoculture of livestock. Now, these are commonly called CAFOs, or concentrated animal feeding operations. So these certainly, and you look at these certainly are not farms as we like to picture our meat growing up on. In fact, these CAFOs this is where most of our food comes from. I have a friend who's an animal scientist, and she said, if we didn't grow our livestock like this, we wouldn't have enough space to grow enough meat to meet the desires of the United States citizens. I say desires because citizens in the United States eat a lot of meat, and they certainly do not need to eat as much as they do. The U.S. has a problem with overnutrition, and meat is a big part of that. Okay, so let's take a look at some more specific problems with CAFOs. So you may have heard about animal welfare issues with livestock growth in the United States and around the world. So once in a while, we always see some pretty awful treatment of animals, videos that come out and they go viral, and there's a lot of outrage. So that's a pretty extreme case of animal welfare. These CAFOs are regulated, and so I don't know how common it is for animals to be treated that badly, as you see in some of those videos. But it certainly is against the law for them to be treating animals that way. But I'm going to go back and just imagine if you're a cow and you are living in this situation. There's no grass. There's high concentration of animals, and so they're probably not very happy cows. Also, we have pigs here. Also, probably not a very happy situation for them to be living in. And here we have chickens. Now, this picture on the right is actually fairly, this would be kind of your happier way that a chicken is grown. If you buy something that says free range, if it's not organic, even if it is organic, these chickens are free range on the right. They're not in cages. And so this is what free range looks like. They're not outside in the sun, just roaming around grassy lawn. They're inside, and they're kept inside because conditions can be controlled. So even if animals aren't being directly mistreated, there's still a concern for animal welfare with any production of livestock. Because those areas are so highly concentrated with animals, and because those animals are walking in feces, there is a high risk of disease in the way that we grow our meat. Another thing that adds to this is that those animals are often, especially cattle, treated prophylactically with antibiotics. This is becoming less common because of issues with antibiotic resistance, and I'll get there. But we know that giving livestock antibiotics increases their growth, so they can grow faster. Remember, the organizations that are growing these livestock don't view them as necessarily animals, they're viewing them as meat. And so the faster you can grow them, the faster you can get them to market, the more money you can make. So if you can increase the rate of growth with antibiotics, you're going to do that because then you get more in a shorter amount of time. what we're starting to see is that this prophylactic